Abraham Lincoln, 16th President of the United States of America, once said, "At what point, then, is the approach of danger to be expected? I answer, if it ever to reach us, it must spring up amongst us. It cannot come from abroad. If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of freemen, we must live through all time or die by suicide." What Lincoln is saying here is that America won't ever be destroyed by enemies abroad. If we are to be destroyed, it will be from the enemies within. This message rings as true today as it did in the 1800s, and perhaps even more so. Our country has famously conducted numerous military adventures abroad. Each time we do so, our country would come out of the conflict intact. Even when we arguably lost a conflict, the state and territorial integrity would endure. To outsiders, it looks as if the American nation is invincible. Even at our lowest point, since the Civil War in the 1860s, the threat to our national integrity was minimal. It is a wonder how we did it. However, with this success comes complacency. With complacency comes new ideas. While new ideas should be welcome, not all new ideas are desirable, and we should not implement new ideas just for the sake of it. The truth is, over the years, we have developed an internal enemy that has the potential to destroy the American nation. They have been gnawing at the foundations of the country for years and have succeeded in infesting and rotting out many of our institutions. This enemy is not a single movement, but has a combination of factors in common: internationalism, cosmopolitanism, anti-whiteism, anti-colonialism, anti-culture, anti-everything that makes our country the country that it is. I would argue that we call these people the anti-civilizationists, because the ideas and policies that these people argue for would result in the decline of our civilization as we know it. These people come from both the right and the left. The biggest examples of American anti-civilizationism are the progressive movement, the woke, the neocons, the anarchists, and those that would make excuses and turn a blind eye toward our civilizational decay. Should these anti-civilizationists succeed, America will be brought down. You cannot run a country when your ideas run counter to everything the country stands for. An anarchist cannot run a state. A neocon cannot keep the peace. A progressive does not know how to mind tradition, and the woke flat out just can't run a country. I'm sorry, you just can't. All of these ideologies put America last and are a form of national looting. Looting the power of America in order to benefit their own cliques or for their foreign masters. The woke left seeks to please the non-whites to cure America of our racism. The neocons seek to please NATO and Israel and act as their personal protection racket. The worst part is that over the course of nearly 70 years, these groups in their early forms managed to take control of much of the state. They controlled the definitions of patriotism and good citizenship. How can they, when they oppose patriotism and good citizenship? When you are in power, even if you profess an anti-civilizationist ideology, you get to define what is good for the nation. The neocons, in their capture of the state, defined patriotism as supporting their foreign adventurism at the expense of domestic integrity. The neocons then gave way to their left-wing equivalents, the American liberal/progressive left portion of the Uniparty. The foreign policy counter-revolution led by the neocons was complete. The liberals would lead the domestic counter-revolution. The domestic counter-revolution would include the demonization of American history, culture, and the demonization of the white American. The counter-revolution came to a high in 2020, when the anti-white sentiment was at its highest point and our cities were burned and our monuments destroyed as compensation. Now, to add insult to injury, they are attempting to install foreign transplants in control of our major cities. It is important to note that I use the term counter-revolution because I consider these people traitors to the American Revolution. The American Revolution defined our values. Any attempt to destroy those values is counter-revolutionary. The only way to reverse this course is by destroying the counter-revolutionaries wherever they pop up, whether they be in government, in society, in daily life, in the private sector, everywhere. If just one of them slips through, the entire civilization is at risk of collapse. The end result that these anti-civilizationists want is a world where nations do not exist, and we are all separated into economic zones. They might entice you with promises of socialism or national liberation or anti-colonialism, but the end result is playing into the hands of the global capitalists that they claim to fight against. Before going further, I should point out that everything I wrote before this point was weeks before the assassination of Charlie Kirk. With that in mind, we now know how far the anti-civilizationists are willing to go to enforce their belief system on the rest of the country. There is no room for debate with these anti-civilizationists, because the anti-civilizationist believes themselves to be fighting for the greatest good. Those who fight believing that they are good cannot be convinced that they are, in fact, doing evil. This is how the old communist regimes managed to kill millions of people. To them, the opposition was against the prospect of a future where the working class owned the means of production, where there would be no more state or no more bosses or managers or the like. All options were on the table to achieve that future, including mass murder, because in the end, the future that would come about would be the absolute good. There would be no conflict in a world with no class struggle. A religious extremist will also do this. To them, their actions are morally just, because in the end, they will go to heaven, or whatever paradise their beliefs promise them after death. As they themselves do not fear death, they have no qualm about killing others. Anyone who grew up during ISIS's formation and watching the indiscriminate killing in the most gruesome of ways of innocent people in the Middle East can bear witness to that. I would argue that the anti-civilizationist is worse than the worst communist regime or religious extremist terror group. At least those people were fighting for something, a future paradise that would benefit somebody, whatever that is. The anti-civilizationist, however, fights for ultimately nothing. There is no collective good that will come out of the anti-civilizationist winning out over everyone else. The anti-civilizationists are a network of conflicting interests because ultimately their desires are mainly their own selfish desires. The neocon fights for war. The anarchist fights for themselves. The woke fights for the fringes of society. The neoliberal fights for the market. The progressive fights for progress, whatever that means. There is no collective good that any of these factions fight for. Of course, these aren't the only factions that I consider anti-civilizationists. There are so many more, but these are the loudest factions that have actual influence or power. If these people succeed in the struggle for power, then civilization will cease to exist. Everything we have built in the thousands of years of human history will be erased. People will become mere numbers with no meaning to their lives. I choose civilization. I choose to honor the achievements of my ancestors and build off of the foundation that they laid, not destroy the foundation entirely. I believe in the right of all nations to exist. We must fight against those that don't believe in anything but who also think that their lack of belief should govern the land. We must not succumb to endless, pointless war, anarchy, or social progress for progress's sake. We must not allow the whims of the market to dictate national policy. Circling back to the beginning of this piece, there are people who would destroy us from within. They just don't realize it. They blame us, those that wish to preserve the nation, as the true destroyers of civilization. Sadly, they have convinced a good section of the population of their position. There can be no compromise here. We cannot allow them to partially destroy the nation. Like a rot, it would eventually spread to the rest of the civilization that they had not yet destroyed. The point of this speech I'm giving here is that in the end we need to choose civilizational integrity. The other option would be us living in a global third world condition or not living at all because some idiot just launched the nukes. We must reject civilizational decay. Thank you for listening, everybody, and have a happy Halloween. Stay safe.